There we go.
All right. Well, welcome to all of you who could make it for tonight's session on transitioning from high school to college. I am so pleased that we have Janice Royal with us tonight to talk about that. She is from the Royal College Consulting. So she's been an independent educational consultant since 2012. She is the founder and president of Royal College Consulting, based in Costa Mesa. Her formal education includes a BA from California State University, Long Beach, and an MA from Claremont Graduate University. After graduation, Janice worked as a marketing professional for insurance companies over the course of nearly 20 years until her youngest child was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome. Upon learning of her child's diagnosis, she retired from the corporate world to learn everything about parenting, educating, and encouraging children who are neurodiverse. This journey led Janice to the area of college counseling as she discovered that college planning resources were scarce for families challenged with LD, ADHD, dyslexia, and ASD. Seeking to change this for her community, she earned a college counseling certificate from UC Riverside, became a professional member of the Independent Educational Consultants Association, and a member of the Learning Disability Association of America. Through these organizations, she has earned hundreds of hours of continuing education on college planning for neurodiverse students. Janice has also personally visited over 400 colleges and universities across the country. Janice was elected to the board of directors to the Prentice School, a K through 8 school in Tustin that teaches students with dyslexia, ADHD, and other language-based learning disabilities in 2024. Janice lives with her husband of 35 years, Rob, in Costa Mesa with two rescued, Bichon Frege poodles. I hope I said that okay.
Close
Her
enough.
oldest daughter graduated with a BS in electrical engineering from Montana State University in Bozeman, and her youngest graduated with a BA in biology from Concordia University, Irvine. Both daughters are graduates of Orange Lutheran High School. So please welcome Janice Royal. Thank you, Janice.
Thank you so much, Danielle. It's great to be back again this year. So we have a lot to cover. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and hopefully that is coming through. Everyone can see that. Yes? Just go ahead and confirm that you can see it,
Yes,
Danielle.
I can see that.
Beautiful. Okay, so let me go ahead and begin our slideshow. All right, here we go. We are going to go from the beginning, and our goal tonight is for me to walk the parents and students through some very important next steps that will help ensure a solid, successful transition from high school to college, focused primarily on students with learning disabilities. So that is the goal tonight. Okay, so I want to start out with the differences between high school and college. The next couple of slides are a little text heavy. I'm not going to read them all, but I do want to make sure that students and their parents are very aware that these are significant changes between high school and college. So the first one is that in high school, time is managed by a student's day is managed by the high school schedule. You get to school, you go through your, 5 or so classes, you have your lunch period and all that kind of stuff. It's very, very structured. In college, it is far less so. Students will spend a nominal amount of hours during the day in the actual lecture hall, attending classes or going to labs. And that comprises a very small portion of each day. That leaves a significant amount of time that a student has free. And that's the time that often students with maybe some executive function, time management deficits struggle because they have this wide open calendar, and it may not occur to them that they need to spend a whole lot of time when they're not in the classroom, reading the material, being in study groups, doing whatever assignments have been given, and working on the long-term assignments, whether that's research papers or going over notes each day and that kind of thing. So just to reiterate, in high school, the difference between high school and college is that a student's schedule is split, and they have to be aware of that and schedule, craft their schedule accordingly. There's a good rule of thumb that for every hour a student is in the classroom in the lecture hall, they need to devote 2 hours outside of the classroom doing all of those things that I just mentioned: rereading their notes, preparing for quizzes and tests, doing the readings, doing any kind of assignment. So students would be well served to block out in their schedule each day time devoted specifically to each class. No one's going to do that for them. That's something that they have to, become familiar with doing for themselves. And that folds into the second way that college is very different from high school. And that is that in high school, your teachers are giving you, they have lesson plans. They're, walking through curriculum bit by bit throughout the semester and throughout the year. That is far less structured in college. Professors will often go off on tangents sometimes during a lecture period, depending on the subject that or the material that they're presenting to the students in that given day. And it can often feel, it's just going to feel far less structured. And the challenge with that is that college students are still 100% responsible for the material that has been presented on the syllabus that's given the first day of class. And even if the professor didn't hit all that material in the lectures throughout the semester, that's neither here nor there. The student is still responsible for the material. So there's a lot more self-teaching, a lot more independent learning that has to happen during, the semester or the quarter, depending on what your college term is. So that is, again, an important difference to be aware of. The third way that is very important for students to accept really, really soon is that cramming is not going to work. It can often be a go-to for high school students, and some high school students find that cramming all the material, doing late study sessions right before tests works well for them, and they're able to pull off solid grades. That will not be helpful. That will not be a good strategy in college. There's simply too much material that is presented at too fast of a pace to college students. So I always want to make sure that students are, if you have a child that used this method for studying during high school and, kind of got away with it, they are going to need to know that that will not serve them well in college at all. So that's a big difference there as well. The fourth area is that in college, the social, life is wide open. So students, again, unlike high school where your day is very structured, there's all of these events happening, you join clubs and that kind of thing. Maybe you're an athlete, so you have all of your practices and games and so on. There's just a lot more structure to a student's life in high school. In college, it's wide open, right? So you can choose to participate in clubs. I highly encourage that students do so. That's how you're going to find your community and make a lot of friends. Students can choose to join the Greek life, right? A fraternity or a sorority, or not. They can choose to go out of their room and go down to the dining hall and, sit at a table and strike up conversations, or not. They can get their food to go and go sit in their room. Not a good strategy. But bottom line, it's this wide open uh, opportunity for students to engage and meet new people and go out of their comfort zone. And that's almost on a daily basis that they have to make that choice to leave their dorm room, engage, meet new people, join clubs, try to create study groups, go into the dining hall and engage with lots of new people. So that's just going to feel very, very different and is a good thing to be aware of. Okay, last two, living in a dorm for parents that have gone to college and perhaps lived in a dorm at one point during their college years. Dorm life is unique, and it is typically described as, two strangers coming together and living in a very itty bitty living space. Dorms look very different across universities. So, that's going to depend on what kind of housing you're paying for or what the situation is for the student. But whatever that looks like, typically students, especially freshmen, do not have their own room. Typically, they are living, again, in a pretty small space and sharing that small space. And so that's going to bring up issues that they may not have had to deal with at home. Maybe they had their own room at home and didn't have to share with their siblings or whatever that might have looked like. So they're going to have to build these skills for negotiating that little space. Everything from when are we turning out the lights each night to what is the guest policy, especially overnight guests, things like that. So those are all going to be new areas of negotiation for a student, and that can, be definitely exciting and an important life skill, but it can also raise a little anxiety. So just more to be aware of. Okay, and then the last area that college is very different, especially for a student that is moving out of the family home and onto campus. They're going to be responsible for each of their days in that whole 24-hour period, 7 days a week. They're responsible for themselves. Everything from when they wake up, how they get their laundry done, how they navigate, again, the social scene, getting to class on time, going to class consistently and every class they can, unless they're sick, managing their money even, managing their meal plans. There's just a lot of details that that a young person who's been living in their parents' home all these years, all of a sudden will be faced with. And it's all very manageable, but it's all new. So there's a lot happening all at once because all of these things, are going to be colliding in the child's and the student's life all at once. So I wanted to start the presentation with several of the significant ways that college is different from high school. Then I'm going to transition to, well, okay, so how can I, the student, or how can I, as the parent, help my child be successful as they get familiar with college life and to manage all of these changes? So that's what we're going to move into next. One of the very first things I want to highlight is the fact that the student is now, once they graduate high school, the college will consider the student to be completely responsible for every step of the process throughout until they graduate. Communication will be done exclusively to the student by the college. Parents are not copied. Parents have noticed this during the admissions process. You're not copied on emails, and so you sometimes don't even know what was going on with all of those steps. But that leads me to these next steps that I want everyone to be aware of. And the good news is that as an Orange Lutheran student, I know from experience with my own daughters, as well as the Orange Lutheran students that I've been fortunate to work with year after year after year. I usually have several Orange Lutheran students in my practice. Orange Lutheran is very buttoned up on this process. They are not going to drop the ball as long as your child or the student tells them what college they're matriculating to. Where will they be starting in the fall? And if I know Orange Lutheran, they've asked that question probably 5, 6, 7 more times because that is where Orange Lutheran will send the final official transcript. They send it electronically. That is an official document that leaves OLU and goes to the college. That must be received by July 1st. That is the deadline for most colleges. So just be aware of that. Students and parents, that's important. Now, if OLU should happen to drop the ball somewhere along the way and the transcript not show up by July 1st, that would be a bummer and a rare occurrence, but it's the student's responsibility to make sure that that transcript has been received. So that's where they're going to want to log in to their student portal, the same place where they've been looking to see if they've been admitted, the same place where they accepted their offer of admission and sent the deposit, that kind of thing. They will be able to see that the transcript has indeed arrived. If they log in July 1st and it's not there, they need to follow up immediately and get that handled. So again, that's a big difference. No longer is it Orange Lutheran or the teachers or DSPS program or Danielle or parents responsibility that these documents are there. It's now up to the student to make sure this is all happening. Okay, and along those lines, if your child did any dual enrollment classes, took any community college classes, maybe they took a class through another high school program like UC Scout, or Fusion Academy, whatever that might have looked like, those transcripts, those official transcripts also must be transmitted, ordered, and received by the school that the student will be attending in the fall. And that deadline is also July 1st. And then lastly, any AP tests that the student, if they took AP tests and they scored a 3, 4, or 5, they will need to log into their College Board account and make sure that those test scores are being sent to their university. This year, the AP will be releasing the May, so the tests that the students are just finishing up this week. Those test scores will be available on July 7th. So I recommend that students log into the College Board and complete the order so that all of their AP scores, pass, no pass, it doesn't matter, all of them are sent to where they're attending in the fall. That way the registrar will receive them and the student can get the appropriate credit, as part of the past test. They can test out of some of those general education requirements. Okay, let me keep moving. The next really important step is freshman orientation. So I recommend to all of my families and to the students who have to go in and make this registration happen, that they choose the very earliest orientation, freshman orientation, that is available. So obviously you have to wait till you graduate Orange Lutheran, but if there's a freshman orientation that very next week, go to that one. And the reason that it's important to go so early is because that's where the student is going to meet with their academic advisor and choose their classes. Choosing classes early is critical for all students, but I would dare say particularly critical for students with learning disabilities, because there are times of the day that they are going to be stronger and more attentive. Maybe they're on medication and that sets them up to, be more attentive in the morning hours, or, whatever that looks like for the student. Working with the academic advisor, they're going to have more options available to them if they get to those early orientations, right? So later on, as the summer wanes on, then the early morning sessions or the afternoon sessions are all going to be filled up, and they're going to have to settle for taking classes at times that perhaps they're not as strong, right? So that's one of the big reasons. Another reason is to make sure that they have the opportunity to meet with the Student Disability Services Office and get to know, that's what these offices are called. It's not the DSPS office, as you, I'm sure, are well aware, but on college campuses, there's the office that they're going to work with to get their accommodations is going to be called Student Disability Services, or some variation thereof. So that is an important place to visit after the orientation activities have been, participated in. Orientation is also for parents, believe it or not. They go as well. And that's where they learn all of the important things, like where your child goes if they're having mental health struggles, where they're going if they have health issues, on campus, different resources available for your child, safety concerns for your child, and very important for all parties is that's where you get your bill. So you know what's due, when it's due, and all of that. So that's another great reason to get in early. Some universities will have special orientations just for students with learning disabilities. I would say if that's available where the student is going, jump on that as early as possible. That gives, again, the student time with the Student Disability Services Office to get to know the staff, to get to know all the resources, to learn about everything that's available to them to help them be successful academically, socially, mental health-wise, all those things. It also is a time where students can be on campus and get to know where their classes are going to be held, to get to know where a lot of the important, buildings are, such as the library, the student services building, everything from the different eateries on campus to, where to go for where the health center is. All of that can be anxiety producing if a student all of a sudden has a need and doesn't know where to go. So we want to make sure that our students with learning disabilities that tend to have a little more anxiety than some of their peers, we want to mitigate that as much as possible. So getting to an early orientation and a specific orientation if available is a great way to mitigate that anxiety and keep that low. I also highlighted some bridge programs that universities across the country that specialize, they're universities that offer four-year degrees specifically for students with on the autism spectrum, with dyslexia, and with quite severe learning disabilities. But I mentioned their programs because they have some really wonderful transition programs. So what I'm going through in this hour is fast and furious. You'll get a copy of the recording. There's more resources at the end of this presentation. But these are programs specifically for this student to spend a couple of weeks with other, soon to be college freshmen, and making sure that they have they're getting kind of a college 101 to focus on their executive function skills that they're going to need to be successful throughout college, and also to just become familiar with the pace and the level of material that is going to come at them when they begin their classes in the fall. So those are some that are very well known across the country: the Beacon College Navigator Program, Landmark Summer Bridge Program, Adelphi, and so on. So I wanted to make sure that everyone was familiar with that. Okay, so one of the most important things, and honestly, Danielle and I talked about this before you were able to join us, is the critical importance of securing accommodations at the new home, right? At the new college, at the university. This honestly is a step that is often missed because lots of reasons. Some students might feel, you know what, I did great in college, or pardon me, in high school, I'm fine. I'm going to do great. This is a chance. College is a chance for me to have a fresh start. I don't need all these accommodations like I had in school. That is a frequent thought process of young people. Sometimes they don't realize how, again, fast and the quantity of material that's going to come at them as a new freshman, on top of all of those other things that I mentioned early in the presentation, all the differences, all the changes in their daily life, all of that change on top of rigorous courses, rigorous material coming at them at a fast pace, is unfortunately a recipe for failure without the accommodations that they are entitled to. So I can't stress this enough. This is just so very important. So I want to make sure that parents and students understand that the student needs to register with the Student Disability Services Office before the fall semester begins. And before is the key word there. Students cannot register with Student Disability Services after the semester has begun. It doesn't work like that. The door is closed. Now it will reopen before the next semester. So students can, sometimes that happens. Students get to college, they're like, I'm going to try this without accommodations, and they realize not a wise decision. So they ultimately then go to Student Disability Services and register for the subsequent semester. I think it's wise to register now. You can register today, tonight, to start the process right away, but get these in place before the fall semester starts. Then the student can decide whether to use the accommodation or not, and they can make that decision for each class. Maybe they need accommodations for the heavy reading classes, like the social sciences or the humanities. Maybe they don't need accommodations for their science and math classes, but that's up to them to decide. But better to have the option than to have the door closed for the semester. So again, get that process rolling. Basically, it's really quite simple to get the process rolling. All the student has to do is go to their college's website, go to the little search icon on the home page, and type in Student Disability Services. And the first thing that will pop up is the correct office. The student clicks on that link, and there will be all of the instructions for how they begin the process to register with the office. One of the first things that they're going to have to provide in order for the staff that work at these offices is any documentation that the student has. So these are going to be things like the Lutheran Formal Accommodation Plan that Danielle and her team have put together, and that guides the students' accommodations in the DSPS program. That will also include formal evaluations from an educational psychologist, right? A psych ed evaluation. Those are typically very long documents that you had to pay a small fortune for. Even if they're older than 3 years, 3 years old, still send that documentation. Whatever documentation the student has, that should be sent to the Student Disability Services office, and that's going to begin the process for registering the student. The next step after that documentation has been sent and the online request that the student wants to register with the office, an official, a staff member from the office will email the student, will reach out to the student and set up a time to do an intake meeting. And the intake meeting is important. It's important for parents to know they're not invited. This is really important for the Student Disability Services staff to have the conversation, with just the student. And what they're looking for is they're looking for the student to be able to, one, identify what their specific learning disability is, right? Do they have ADHD? Do they have dyslexia? Do they have something else? Do they have dysgraphia? Do they have, so on and so forth? And the next thing the student needs to be able to verbalize is, how does their disability impact them in the classroom, right? Does that make it hard for them to concentrate? Does that make it difficult for them to be able to read long passages, during the process, during the classroom, or even outside of the classroom, right? A lot of text can be extremely difficult for language-based disorders or disabilities. And then they need to be able to communicate what accommodations they had in high school and what worked for them. Did they receive extended time on tests? Were they able to take their tests in a reduced distraction environment? Maybe they were able to use assistive technology in the classroom, a pen, for example, that recorded the lecture, and then they were able to play that back or connect it to their computer, and the computer typed up the dialogue, if you will, the script of the lecture, and the student can use that to confirm that their notes, that they didn't miss anything as they were taking notes. There's all sorts of accommodations that can be provided to students in college, as long as the students are able to, again, communicate what they have, how it affects them, what accommodations they receive, and what works best for them. The college often will have more things on the table that they can offer, the menu that they can offer students to help them access their education at the collegiate level than even was available in high school. And so those will be then discussed with the student, and basically an accommodations plan will be put in place as to what is approved. So that all happens, begins with the intake meeting, and then the formal approval of accommodations will come via email a short time thereafter. The fourth bullet there I wanted to call out and make sure that families knew that at the collegiate level, the laws are different. So it's a different federal law that governs students' ability to access their education than it is than the law that protected them in K through 12. So at the collegiate level, universities, colleges are required to work with students to help them access their education, and they can do that through accommodations, many of which I've already specified. What they are not required to do legally, and what they will not do, is modify the curriculum. So they will not eliminate the foreign language requirement. They will not eliminate the requirement for the major. They're not going to modify curriculum. Students have to be able to do the work that their peers are doing at, even so the accommodations are, again, hopefully I'm making that clear. So accommodations are one thing, but modification to the curriculum and to the major requirements is something that will not happen. And they're not required by law to do that. The only possible exception that I'm familiar with are things like foreign language. Sometimes universities, Baylor University is a great example, they will allow a student to take cultural classes instead of the language. So instead of French, they might end up taking a class where they would learn about the culture and the heritage and all of that of France and so on and so forth. And so that's about the only exception that I am familiar with. So I wanted you all to be aware of that. The process of asking for accommodations is, once you're registered with the Student Disability Services office, you're in. You don't have to re-register every semester. But what the student does do is they tell the Disability Services office what classes they want accommodations for. So again, that will vary by semester, by student, because that based on their disability, if they need more help on heavy reading, heavy writing classes, or maybe they need more help with science and math-based classes, whatever that looks like for the student, they can identify which classes they want the accommodations for. If they don't know, then they can request accommodations for all the classes that they're going to be enrolled, and then they can choose not to use them as the semester goes on. That is all part of the student getting to know the Disability Services office, the staff there, and learning how to access their accommodations. That should be something, a place on campus that they become very familiar with and get to know the staff there who will help them throughout the whole process, through all the years. That was the one office that I sent a big bouquet of flowers, and I always sent food to that staff, because where my daughter went to college, because they were so wonderful in helping her every semester navigate this whole process. And they just were amazing people, and they cared so deeply. So, I tried to show my appreciation as a parent by doing that, along the way. And then the last thing is another step in the accommodations process is that the student gets registered with Student Disability Services, the accommodations are granted. Then what happens at the beginning of the semester, the professor will receive, it's all electronic now, they'll receive an email or in their mail, they'll receive a list of students in their class that receive accommodations. They don't get any information about the student's diagnosis. They don't get any information, any private information beyond the fact that the student is approved for these accommodations. And it's up to the student. I always recommend that students introduce themselves at the end of the first class session and say, hi, I'm Janice Royal. I was approved for accommodations in your class for, extended time on assignments, extended time on tests, and to be able to take my test in a distraction-free environment. And that way the professor can check their notes and go, yes, nice to meet you. Okay, great. And that's all there is to it. But then the professor can put, a face to the name and know who, specifically who these accommodations are for. That's just a good practice to get into the habit of. Okay, so continuing on this vein of students specifically with learning disabilities being successful as they move into the collegiate environment. These are things that hopefully have long ago been taken care of by by the families with their children. And as I alluded to in the past slide, when the Disability Services Office will do an intake interview with the student must be able to name their disability, know how it affects them, and what accommodations work best for them. It's important for the student to be able to comfortably describe their disability to others. They don't have to tell anyone if they don't want to. As they get older, they might, disclose it more often, but the only people that are going to know a student has accommodations are the student, the Disability Services Office, and the individual professors that the student is requesting accommodations for that class. So that's it. Their peer, no one else knows, no one else, it's very private, personal information. So that's hopefully a relief to students. And then moving on, students hopefully have begun to understand throughout the high school years what strategies help them learn best. Do they need to use, for example, the Pomodoro technique for studying? Do they need to chunk up their time or whatever? If they haven't learned all the skills that they might need to be successful in college, that's okay. That's what the Student Disability Services Office is there to help them. They will guide them to all of the services on campus. They will have help within that office for the student to help them learn whatever skills they may not yet have to be successful at the college level. Okay, so let's continue on. Part of this process beyond the SDS office is where are the other resources available to me on the college campus that might help me be successful? And I've identified, I would say, kind of the top 10, right? There might be more than 10, 12. These are the top ones that students should become familiar with, whether they learn about where these offices are when they go through orientation, or they pull out a map before they move on to campus and identify where things are, or they wander the campus and run into them, whatever works. But these are often places that students should know where to go for help with math. The writing centers, that should be the first place any student goes to have their first college paper reviewed and critiqued. That is the way I write. I've learned to write so far in high school. Is that sufficient for the college level? Often it is not quite. And so the Writing Center is going to be an invaluable resource for all students to help them learn how to write at the college level. Tutoring and academic support. The second, third, and fourth bullet, those are often in the same place. on a college campus. They're usually, I've seen at more and more colleges where they're a part of the library. So it's often on one of the floors or kind of a wing of the library. Sometimes it's down in the basement. Wherever it is, they're often clustered together. So it's a one-stop shop for students. So that's super helpful. But all of these places are, I think, good resources for the student to identify before they show up on campus. So those are the on-campus resources. Off-campus resources can be equally important for the health of the student. Specifically, if the student is currently seeing a mental health professional, right? Or maybe they're working with an executive function coach. There's all sorts of, pardon me, providers. Maybe they have a physical condition where they have to be seen by a doctor, frequently or every few months. And so those are all things that I want to make sure the student and the parent know that they need to identify and set up before the student, if they're moving even up to Central California or down to San Diego or to another state or across country. These are important things to identify because they need to be local. The student may or may not have transportation. They may or may not have a lot of time to be running around a new city to get to these places. So it's good to get this settled before they move onto campus. The third bullet, prescriptions. That varies by state. To my knowledge, there is no federal law that allows prescriptions to be handled the same way in all of our states. So again, that should be something to be checked out if the student is taking any kind of medication that they take on a daily basis. And then just wise precaution. It's good for the student to know where the local ER is, urgent care, that kind of thing. Get the number. I mean, of course, 911, but it's 911 isn't always needed. So just get the urgent care numbers and some of that in a student's phone, and that's good for them to have in case anything should happen. Okay, now let's transition to critical legal documentation. I recommend that all students, families put these 3 legal documents in place before the student moves on to campus. So durable power of attorney is critical because that will allow the parents to step in and manage any kind of decisions on the child's behalf should the child become incapacitated. And don't want to scare anybody, but let's be real, right? Things happen, and we just want to be prepared so that should anything happen where the student cannot speak for themselves, that the parent can step in legally and speak for them. My own personal story with my youngest daughter is that she was in a horrendous horseback riding accident. She's an equestrian, and the horse threw her, and she went flying. I didn't even know how many feet, but she landed face first on the hard dirt and broke her glasses. Her glasses sliced into the bridge of her head. And her nose literally was kind of hanging on there for dear life. It was horrendous. I wasn't there to view it, thank goodness, but she obviously needed to be taken to the ER and all sorts of care, many MRIs and x-rays or whatever they did to make sure her back or spine or whatever wasn't broken. Bottom line is she never lost consciousness, so she could speak for herself. But through her recovery and the PTSD and the trauma afterwards, we were so grateful to have these documents in place because we were able to step in and help guide her her care and her interactions with her professors and the Student Disability Services Office, so everybody could help make sure that she, had the help that she needed to finish out the semester while she was recovering. So just really important documents. Your family attorney can draw up a durable power of attorney. I have a resource there called Mama Bear Legal Forms. That is also, there's many other types of online services available. Whatever you find, this is just a resource that that is often referred to in college transition planning. So whatever might work for your family, but I do recommend getting the durable power of attorney, not just the power of attorney, but that durable, because that will give parents a voice for their children if their children can't speak for themselves. The second one is FERPA. So that stands for Federal Education Rights Privacy Act. And what I mentioned early on in this presentation was that from now on, the college is going to communicate directly with the student. Parents no longer have a right to access any of the student's educational records. They do not have a right to know if the student is attending class, what their grades are, anything. They have to rely on their child to communicate that information. The FERPA gives the parent some rights back, if you will, or some rights and be able to find out some of that information from the university. Without the FERPA in place, the university cannot share any information with parents. With a signed FERPA and so on, pardon me, with the signed FERPA, they can indeed get some of that information that the university offices can talk to them. So the FERPA form can be found on the university's website. Again, go to the home page, go to the search icon, type in FERPA, and it will come up. Download the form, and the student actually is the one who needs to sign it. So they put in their information, they sign it, and they name their parents as the people who have a right to, they're granting access to their educational records. Then that signed document needs to be emailed to the registrar's office at the university. With that being on file, then again, the Student Disability Services Director can speak to you. The registrar's office can speak to you. The financial aid office can speak to you, that kind of thing, about the student-specific educational records. The third document is HIPAA. And so I think everyone's probably familiar with that, but this is essentially the document that, again, has to be signed by the student, by the person who is 18 or older, and it grants the parents access to their medical records. So again, in the case of my daughter, when she was in the hospital and then recovering, we needed to get some medication renewed, and she just wasn't able to do it. So I called the doctor's office, explained the situation. This document was on file, and so we were able to take care of it on her behalf. Without that, they can't talk to me. So there you go. That is really, really important information as well. Okay, I have thrown so much information, I know, at you, and that's why we're recording this. So you can rewind and go to the slides that you really know are particularly crucial to you, and re-listen to that. I can send these slides directly to Danielle, and she can share them with you all. But at this point, I just want to make sure that students know that now they have the choice, and they will continue to have the choice each day throughout their college experience. I am showing visually that college without accommodations is going to be a long, hard, stairway slogging through each class each semester, and it's absolutely not necessary. So you don't have to take the stairs and make it hard on yourself. Take the escalator, enjoy the view, get your accommodations that you're legally entitled to access your education. And you will have a far superior experience, and with far less stress and anxiety and all the rest of it. So I encourage that students get their accommodations and take the smoother path through into their college education. And then my last slide is go be great. I don't know, you can't see it because I have my little marketing spiel of my logo and stuff on my background, but I have a huge wall sign behind me that says go be great. And specifically it says underneath go be great, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord will be with you wherever you go. Joshua 1:9. And I think that is an important message for all of our young people. And we're all so proud of how far you've all come, all that you've had to overcome to get this far. And we want you to be great in the next stage. So at this point, I can open it up for questions. There are a couple more slides with additional resources, but again, that will come in the slide deck, and I think, can easily be researched kind of on your own. So Danielle, do you have any questions that from experience that where students might stumble, or and any input, anything like that might be helpful?
No, I just think really encouraging them to go to the disability service offices, do their research, and request the accommodations they need is just going to make college so more accessible and easier for them. So, I mean, I think, I think that's it. I think you've covered all of these great things. So I really, really appreciate you taking your time out of your evening to give this important information to all of our families and all the students. And I so appreciate all that you do for Orange Lutheran. So thank you so much, Janice.
You're very welcome. My pleasure. All right. Well, please make sure your families, they'll have my information on the deck. They can always reach out. I'm happy to answer questions. You don't have to hire me. I love OLU. I'm a Lancer for life, even though I didn't go there, but I go to the gala every year to support OLU. I think it's a phenomenal school.
Appreciate that.
Please reach out. I'm happy to help.
I will. And I will pass on all of the information once I receive it from you.
Awesome. All right.
All right. Thanks, Janice. Have a great evening.
Great
Bye-bye.
evening. Bye.